This is Marlin Simon doing duck soup. You can find us on the video in duck soup, Marlin Simon duck soup, and just talking a little bit about the wreck diving I did back in the 60s. Down here in the Keys, back in the 60s, there was a real flurry of activity. Probably 60, 62, 3, 4, 5, 6 in those time areas. And I had a little skiff I'd go out in, and I built myself an airlift. An airlift is where you pump air down through a tube. I had a 6-inch diameter PVC pipe. I would pump air down to the bottom of the pipe and go down into the sand or dirt or wherever we were at, and the air would bubble up the pipe, and in doing that it would expand and then suck the sand and everything from where you were working. And in a day's time, I remember one day I dug a hole as big as a whole Volkswagen car. You could have put the whole of the car in it while I'm sucking all the sand off looking for treasure. I was out working on the Tres Puentes. She was in 15 feet of water off Alamorada. And I had worked all day, and I had this massive hole in the ballast rock of the Tres Puentes, and never found anything in there. And a guy named Marty Maylock, who wrote some books later on, who was a real interesting character, he went down in my hole the next day and found a bunch of silver bars. And I thought, oh man, I missed it by just a couple of feet, but he ended up airlifting in that area. Another interesting one, I was airlifting on the Chavez. She went down in 1733. In fact, there was 18 ships went down in 1733. And the Chavez was one of the closest inshore ones. She's in 7 foot of water. If you go out Snake Creek and take a right, 7 foot of water, the remains of some of it are still there. But I was airlifting the Chavez, and I was airlifting up in the bow, and the bow was plated with lead. To keep it from leaking, apparently, they had a lead plate on both sides. So I was peeling off the lead, and then I started working on the inside of the ship. And we're down probably 10 or 12 feet because the wreck had gone down into the mud and the sand there. And I was airlifting there. And I got down in the bow section of the ship, and there was cordwood laid up. And it was laid 90 degrees to each other, and it was all sort of compressed. It wasn't big pieces of wood like you'd expect now, but it had shriveled up over the years. I'm sure it had been washed away. Well, I ended up going down through this layers of wood, and then I'm down in the bottom of the hull, and I find these funny little bones. So I picked up a bunch of the bones and put them in my I think I had a bag or a box or whatever I had down there, and I took it back and I laid it up on the dock. I was working out of Chesapeake Restaurant at the time at Whale Harbor. Put it up on the dock, and some German doctor walks down the dock. He says, "What do you have here?" And I said, "Well, I was airlifting out on the Chavez and that." And he looks at him, he says, "You have human finger and feet bones right here." I go, oh man, that sounds exciting. And what apparently must have happened is that when the ship wrecked in the hurricane, there was somebody up forward that got trapped probably under the wood, got trapped in there and ended up dying. And I had his feet and finger bones. I did a lot of other wreck diving with some of the people down here that I knew over the years, and we were out on the Herrera. She was in 18 foot of water off Alamorada, and at that time the ballast pile was still there. The boats used to go out there and fish on the ballast pile because the ballast pile was 7 or 8 feet above the surface of the seagrass and everything. And we ended up digging through it, and the ship had actually sunk down into the sand and mud. So there was a lot of a ballast pile above and a lot below, and we were digging through the ballast pile to see what was in there and airlifting out of it. And the fellow I was with found 2 baskets. They were fairly small, like that, and they were still in good condition. And he opened it up, and one of them had 6 gold rings in it and 7 silver rings. And I can't remember what the other one had, but both those baskets had rings in it. They were obviously picked up in Mexico or wherever the ships had come from. And later on, I found well, actually, we both found a big pewter dish that had been curled up, and there was a fid. A fid is about that long. It's round and comes to a point, and a fid is used to splice line with. And there was this whole pewter plate had been wrapped over this fid, and then we found another pewter plate that was perfect. And the other fellow got both of them because we were out in his boat, and we were diving with his gear at the time. I never found anything really of value except one little coin, and part of it was eaten away one time, and I couldn't tell what it was, but it was a coin, and I don't even know where it ended up, because I probably have it someplace stored away, but I don't know where that is. But there was all kind of interesting stuff out there. We'd find the bricks. They had brick ovens on these ships, and a lot of other iron stuff that got encrusted. And I have one piece of iron someplace around here. It's got a big key. You can see it's encrusted in it with a big loop on it where you hold the thing. And I've never wanted to break it open to see what was in it. I've often wanted to get it x-rayed to see what it looked like. But my wife has moved it somewhere, and I'm not sure where that is now either, because she never valued much junk from the sea. I did have one experience that I've tried to get my grandson involved in, but I know where there's a wreck out there, and we took a flux gate magnetometer. A fellow brought down from Miami, and he said, "Can we test this out?" And I said, "Well, I know where the different wrecks are. Let's take it over the wrecks." And I went over the Chavez, and I said, the magnetometer was back about 200 feet. And I said, "Okay, I'm over the wreck right now. Now you're coming up on it, and you should be up on the ship." And then it went ding, and the flux gate magnetometer registered. And then I said, "Well, let's go on out to the Herrera." So I went out to the Herrera, and I said, "Okay, I'm over the stern of it." The Herrera was a big ship. She was probably a couple 100 feet long or so. And I said, "Okay, your magnetometer is just about there. It should be on the stern right now." Now, the water was murky. You couldn't see down or anything, so I just did everything by ranges. You range up an antenna on shore and then a tree or something. Excuse me. And I could tell where I was, and I take 2 ranges. I knew right where I was, and I ranged all the ships in those days, so I didn't have a GPS. That was before GPSs were out, but we knew exactly excuse me, exactly where we were. And sure enough, it pegged, and then I said, "Okay, let me take you up into the bow of the ship." And I pulled it on up a couple 100 feet, and sure enough, it registered up there too. So we turned around and came back, and I was headed back from the Herrera to the El Capitan, not the El Capitan, to the Chavez, and right off Whale Harbor, that magnetometer pegged and stayed pegged for probably 20 seconds or so. And the guy said, "What wreck is there?" And I said, "No idea." And it wasn't long after that they made it illegal to do any kind of salvage work inshore. And I've gone back and I've jumped in the water about 12 foot deep and never saw anything. There's nothing showing from the surface, but I know there's a wreck there, and it's got to be an incredible wreck to have pegged the magnetometer the way it did. And in those days, before they stopped all the airlifting on the wrecks, we used to go in airplanes and take a look. And that's how Don Gurgiolo found 2 or 3 of the wrecks in those days. And the wreck diving was based on that. Nowadays, everybody's been all over the place out there. They would know if there was something showing. But in those days, the ballast piles showed, the cannons and the anchors were on them. Which brings up another interesting one. I was diving out looking for the wreck that was on Crocker Reef. And I knew that in 1935, after the hurricane, the Pinder brothers had found the cannons that were on that wreck out there. And they didn't seem to know much else about it. There wasn't much history on it. But I was looking for the wreck. The day before Hurricane Betsy, I found the ballast rock. And English ballast rock was more squared and chopped up, where the Spanish ballast rock is smooth and round. I knew I'd found the area where the wreck went down. And of course, the next day was Hurricane Betsy, and I didn't get back out there for over 2 or 3 weeks. When I did get back out there to look at it, the whole reef had changed. The hurricane had moved the sand and the rocks and everything. It exposed a rudder. And the rudder, I ended up going back and bringing the rudder in. It was from the bottom of the rudder to the top, was over the top of the building that we put it at, Venetian Shores Fishing Center. So it had to be at least 14 or 16 foot long. On the bottom of the rudder had a huge round heavy metal plate that obviously kept the rudder down, because the hoop of the rudder, you could walk through the hoop, and the rudder was made of wood, so they had to be able to hold the rudder, the weight of the buoyancy of the rudder had to be held down by the weight of the rudder. And it was way too heavy. We couldn't get it on a boat, so we tied it up underneath the boat and brought it in. And Dick Barnes had a winch down there, and we put it on the winch and hauled the thing up. And it stayed in front of the building for years. I don't know where it went to later on, but there was all kind of things that were showing out there. In fact, the mast, or some of the rigging of the ship, was all exposed. And then after a period of time, the storm, the wind, the sand and everything got shuffled back over and covered over a whole bunch of that kind of stuff. But out on Crocker Reef, it's an English ship of some kind that went down probably in the late 1800s is what they guessed. But it had cannon on it. I don't know what the Pinder brothers ever did in 1935, but they found it after the hurricane then. So there's a lot of stuff still out there to be discovered. A lot of interesting diving, and it's too bad that we can't airlift like we used to do it. God bless you. Have a great day.